gentlemen, welcome back to Free Thought Radio. This is the Kraftkast. My name is Rob Moore. I'm your host. With me in the studio tonight, Sean Frasek and Brian Kester of Mythicist Milwaukee. And on the phone, I hope if I've done this right, is special guest tonight. We are very, very glad to have internet personality and vlogger AronRa. You there, Aaron? You with us, Aaron?
I am.
All right, there he is.
How you do?
Well done. Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've got a...
So what are we going to talk about today?
we got a podcast here in River West, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is a traditionally pretty conservative area, and the folks that you're talking to tonight have dedicated their time and energy to kind of stepping up the movement in our area, and a movement in which you are a somewhat of a celebrity. How would you describe yourself in terms of atheist, mythicist, secularist, blogger? What is AronRa? Excuse me.
Well, as the Texas State Director of American Atheists, I'm a free thought contributor to the Global Secular Council. I don't know how the term celebrity would work. I don't really think that applies to me, but in some circles perhaps. And I'm just an activist, and that I think is about the best way to refer to me.
I've studied up on you and watched a lot of your videos, and the way you speak is extremely impressive. I'm a guy who feels that we need to be out there as atheists and kind of poking the beehive a little bit and trying to be a little bit more provocative than some of these quieter folks who don't call themselves free thinkers. You say activist. What are the main issues that you're trying to get at?
Well, primarily is education. I mean, my biggest issue is that living here in Texas, we have a Board of Education that is openly determined, and they've admitted this blatantly, that they're determined to direct what the kids are allowed to think, what they're supposed to believe. They tailor the lesson plans, whether it's history, whether it's health, whether it's science, whatever the subject is. They want to instill right-wing, religious, right, conservative, Christian, quote, values, quote. And obviously there's a great deal of sarcasm when I use Christian values both together in the same sentence. But, yeah, they want to instill all these right-wing political ideologies in the classroom. And they want to divide the classes. I mean, they don't like there being a middle class. They don't want a government that is necessarily by the people. They want it to be of select people, and this gets pretty open and blatant. The Texas State Republican Party platform a year or two ago actually came out and said that they were against critical thinking and any higher order thinking skills that would challenge a student's fixed beliefs.
They came out and wrote this down.
Yeah, there's no justification in defending a fixed belief. There's no justification in holding to a belief and maintaining that it should be fixed, because beliefs can be wrong. And if they are wrong, they should be corrected. And this is very much against what the philosophy of our educators. One of the people previously who served on the Texas State Board of Education actually wrote a book wherein she said that public education was a tool of the devil. Mind you, she's on the State Board of Education, and she's governing over public education. But she says it's a tool of the devil simply because it wasn't religious indoctrination.
How do people get their heads around it? It stuns me beyond words that any right-thinking person can forward these ideas on. First of all, what's it like living in Texas? And I know it's not the only place. You've got Oklahoma and Arizona and Louisiana. You've got Bobby Jindal and people like this. It seems like an epidemic, especially in your neck of the woods. How do these people? I don't even know what I'm asking here, but what are they thinking? Is it really a conspiracy to? I guess, is it cynical enough to where they want to keep people down so they can keep their place at the top, or do they really believe this crap?
I can't honestly say that they believe this. Now, a lot of people will say that they're believers and they honestly believe it. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who honestly believe. But when you've been immersed in this discussion, whether let's say we're talking about evolution versus creationism, once you've had any time to explore the ideas on either side, you very quickly find yourself having to make a choice. It's forced upon you. You can either remain honest or you can remain creationist, but it is no longer possible to remain both. Now, in the case of the State Board of Education, our former chairman of that board, Don McElroy, most famously received testimonies from, I think it was 120 different scientists, all advocating evolution when they tried to remove evolution from our science books. And in response to this 120 testaments, the 120 people giving testimony, he said that somebody had to stand up to experts. Now, that's the famous quote. The one that is lesser known is when he gives addresses to the classrooms that he teaches, because sadly this dentist, visits his religious expertise on classrooms, and one of the things that he commented in one of his classes, like a graduating class, he said that they needed to keep chipping away at that empirical evidence. So what we have here is something that's very clearly not about truth. This is about what people believe, and whether they believe matters more than whether it is true. And this is very explicit. In one of the debates that I had with Don McElroy and somebody else who was courting the Board of Education some years ago, I think it was about in 2005, that one of the people that I was debating then, who was trying to get evolution out of the Texas classrooms, he was advocating something called Texans for Better Science Education. And what he admitted to me in a moderated debate that he knew that there were many examples of transitional species, but he said he wanted to teach students that there were none, because he said it was important that they believe that there are none. So it is not remotely about what's true and what's not true, and understanding the facts of the matter. This is all about controlling what the kids believe and causing them to believe things, even if they're not true, as long as this is what they want you to believe.
How do you fight?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it kind of does. It's sort of what I feel. Anyway, what is it specifically that we can do here? What is it that you do that works as far as fighting this? And we're not immune to it in Wisconsin. We've got Scott Walker just got reelected. He's taken the limits off voucher programs, allowing public school parents to take their vouchers and send their kids to Lutheran schools where they're teaching them the same bunk out of Genesis as if it were scientific fact. What is it that works? What can we do to fight?
Okay, this is the surprising thing, because we have a whole lot of people here, particularly in this last election, who are of the mind that you should not vote, that somehow inaction is the best course of action. And I don't know how they come to this kind of rationale. Republicans always do better when there's low voter turnout, because they're voting exactly the way their churches tell them to vote. I mean, as a congregation, even though the church has a tax-exempt status because they're not supposed to lobby, that's exactly what these churches do. So whenever you can't get a very high voter turnout, then the voter turnout you do get tends to be those church congregations that are favoring the Republicans. This is why the Republicans swept everything, because 2/3 of the country didn't vote. And all of these people are telling me that, that doesn't matter if they vote, and they're both the same side, and your vote doesn't count. And if any of this was true, then why would it be that they would have gerrymandering? Why would they have voter restrictions? Why would they segregate off or block or make inconvenient in any capacity that they can any situation which does not favor that party? So, I mean, obviously the fact is that voting does work, and I would agree with some of these people when they say that it's a broken system, because, it is. But the way to fix it is by voting, and voting in the right people, and then voting the right people for, pressing that they vote for the right issues. You have to be on top of these people. The Constitution does not defend itself. Texas ignores the Constitution as much as it can. And they even ignore their own state constitution. Here in the state, they have, in the Constitution, you're supposed to provide a free public education. But The Republicans of the modern day want to undermine and destroy the Department of Education. The current new governor and the old governor and our lieutenant governor have all expressed how they could undermine or eliminate the Department of Education and public education in general. And they want to put in vouchers so that money that's supposed to go to public schools ends up going to private schools. And they want everything to be for profit, and they want it all to be religious schools. They don't want to have free public education. And if they do, they don't want it to be competitive. They want to make sure that it is undermined and underfunded. And because public education is your tool of the devil, where it actually teaches people to be useful, and this is not the way the current politics seem to reflect what they want, that they want people to be working minions. They want them to be obedient, and that's pretty much it.
Aaron, this is Brian Kester. Let me play devil's advocate for just a second. When they're talking about public education and their right to, I don't think that they're necessarily saying that we're going to pull all funds and you're going to have to buy schooling. What if they gave you X funds and the private schools competed to get the students? Would that be acceptable? Because obviously we don't want people that are underprivileged not to have an education. I mean, this would be the counter argument. What would you say to that?
I wouldn't be able to talk about that hypothetical argument because they actually did say what you're saying they didn't say.
Oh, really?
I mean, when they I can't believe I can't remember my own governor's name. How could I forget my beloved governor? Oh, yeah, Rick Perry. When he was running for president, one of the three departments that he wanted to eliminate in his announcement was the Department of Education. And other Republicans have made similar statements so that they wouldn't have any public education anymore. They didn't want to have, one of them was arguing that they shouldn't have obligate public education, that children should be able to rejoin the workforce earlier. So one of the arguments he was arguing for was not only this other Republican that was talking was not only that they wanted to remove the necessity of public education and remove public education as a.
So people either sent their kids to private school that just didn't go to school. Is that his idea? Is that what he means by that, Aaron?
Did we lose him?
May have lost him.
Cut off midstream.
Check the phone.
I don't know. You there? Hello? I think we have lost Aaron. Maybe he'll try to call back. Hang up the line so he can call back in.
No, it's extremely interesting what he's sharing. I mean, I didn't know any of this.
Well, there's no doubt that there is a religious push for this. That they do by keeping schools private, then you could obviously skirt around any church and state.
Is that what he's talking about?
I think so.
There he is. Oh, you with us?
Yes, I don't know what happened. I still had a good connection.
Yeah, I don't know.
Suddenly you couldn't hear me anymore.
In World of Warcraft, they'd call that the black screen of death.
I'm asking if they're trying to get rid of the Board of Education, does that mean there just won't be any public schools, and you either send your kid to a private school or you don't?
No, they don't want to get rid of the Board of Education because the board is
department
is a strategic construct. The people on the board who were put there with specific intent. I mean, this is a voluntary position. These people aren't making money off the job. But if you are part of the right-wing voter bloc, then you would receive up to $10,000 or $20,000 in some cases in order to hold that seat. The party provides those funds so that you can get to imagine getting $20,000 for a campaign for a volunteer job.
Right.
And the expectation, of course, is that you will vote the way you're told to.
Right. Much like an elector would, when they're electing the president.
It sounds like a $20,000 job, not a volunteer job.
But do you think? I think you make a convincing argument that theism does have a big part in the motives here. Do you feel like because Texas does have a strong economy, I think in 2009 they're the only state to show job growth. Do they feel like the Christian values, as they put it, when many of these are actually secular, is confirmation bias, and this is why they want to promote this?
Well, I'd have to take a little bit of contest with you. While the idea of the Christian values is highly touted and loudly presented, that's not actually what it is. Because so many of these people can't tell you what's in the Bible, have never read the Bible, don't know what the Ten Commandments are. This is entirely political. You know, that all of what they're saying about values, it really comes down to a political perspective rather than a religious one.
Okay, so you're saying it's more political than religious.
Yes.
What led? I'm going to change tracks a little bit here, Aaron. What in your mind? When I was growing up in the '70s, there were no creationists where I was from in New England. When nobody talked about the Bible as literal. No, I mean nobody. There was nobody in my church who thought that, and I never met a creationist until I moved to Wisconsin and met a kid from Indiana, and he left me scratching my head because I'd never heard of that. What is the cause of the rise in creationism and fundamentalism as we see a rise in non-belief on the other side? Why is this such a popular thing, and where did it come from?
Well, once upon a time, we favored individual education, and we didn't so much manipulate the masses as we did starting in the, I think, 1980s. But you know, your experience as a child and mine are completely different. I didn't meet a single person who was not a creationist until I was a teenager.
Wow.
Absolutely everybody I ever met. I mean, I thought absolutely everyone believed in the flood, for example, because I'd never met an exception to that rule.
Wow.
So it couldn't have been any more different. And I lived in Mormon-dominant areas most of my childhood, which is strange because Mormons today accept evolution and, you know, act as if they always had. But, you know, that wasn't always the case.
Right.
Okay, it wasn't Kingston, Texas, where they actually changed the courthouses to answer heaven-o instead of hello.
Really?
True story.
Come
True
on.
story. I look it up on Google. Kingston, Texas.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's disturbing to me. One of the things that they do, with regard to education in this state, for one thing, was we do abstinence-only sex education because for some reason it's immoral for children to understand what sex is and how it works. So we're supposed to keep them ignorant, and that's going to be their better battle plan. And we're going to tell them just deny one of the strongest biological drives you have at the peak of its activity. Just deny that and go read a book instead, something like that. And of course, because of this, we end up with the nation's highest rate of repeat teen pregnancy. This is what a monumental failure that practice is. But then they want to change everything. They don't just want to suppress science. They don't, they don't want anybody to believe in evolution, for example. They don't want anybody to know that it's even a thing. They want to teach the Bible as if it's, historically correct. There's no part of the Bible that is historically accurate, but this is the way they want to present it anyway. And right now, the big issue that we have is with the history books. Previously, as I mentioned, we had the Board of Education received 120 different professional scientists and representing different science organizations, all arguing advocacy for evolution, and the board ignored all of that testimony. This time around, starting in September, there were dozens of historians, professional historians and educators, who testified to the board that, among other things, that Moses was not a historic character. And that even if he was, he still wouldn't have been an inspiration for the Constitution, that the Constitution was in no way based on Judeo-Christian, quote, values, quote. It had nothing to do with the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments has no relation or inspiration on the Constitution whatsoever. But this is a political point that the religious right has to instill. This is one of their primary core functions. They have to get everybody to believe that this was somehow founded as a Christian nation and that the Ten Commandments is the basis of the Constitution. And it doesn't matter how many people, how many professional historians testified before the board that this is not the case, and we can prove that this is not the case. The board went ahead with that anyway. At first, they decided that they weren't going to do anything. And then they maintained a conversation with some publishers. They'd insisted that the publishers include Moses as if he was a historic character, as if he was an inspiration. And one of those publishers, to their credit, withdrew their book. They refused to add Moses in as if he was a historic character. And out of honor and respect out of that, I want to name them. They were Houghton.
Hawken.
Yeah, they were the ones that pulled their book.
Good for them.
Yeah. And this is what they all should have done, and they were the only publishers who did. The other publishers, I'm really astonished that for the sake of money and for the sake of getting Texas business, that they would put things into their textbooks which are demonstrably wrong.
It's really an
And
embarrassment.
this wasn't the only thing that they put in. The references to Moses are not the only thing. They had all kinds of, pro-white, pro-Christian things that were put in there that were also to the denigration of other religions, of other ethnicities. We had testimony from blacks, Muslims, Sikhs, Native Americans, various degrees of Hispanics, and so forth, all talking about how they were being misrepresented in the history books. But this is part of a whitewash emphasis on the white. They want everybody in Texas history to be white and to be Christian, and that this is a Christian white country.
Including a Palestinian Jesus, right?
Because, as one of our Texas state governors once said when they were talking about teaching Spanish in public school, she said that if English was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for Texas
That's
students.
awesome.
Do you go around to schools and talk like this? Do you give speeches? Are you able to? And is there anywhere that would welcome you besides groups of atheists where you can present?
Well, there's hardly any point in going to a school. Any individual school is going to receive a harsh response, or that they won't want to endure the controversy of having somebody like me. They certainly wouldn't give me a venue to talk there.
The controversy.
As a matter of fact,
truth.
there was one time a year or so ago, there was to be a debate in East Texas, and I was supposed to debate some minister down there on the issue of theism versus atheism, and it had been set up. They got the venue selected, they had the date and everything planned, and then the guy that I was supposed to debate eventually looked me up and bowed out, and then other people looked me up too, and then the venue closed. They said, we're not going to have that guy in our town. So suddenly it was too controversial because I guess it's me. I don't know. But the town of Lufkin, Texas would not let me come debate in their school, which was originally by their invitation.
Aaron, did you think that maybe he saw the long hair and thought you had Samson-like powers?
We love him.
No, I don't think that would have been it, because when you're going to go by superficial judgments, I would have thought that we'd have some clean cut, as they put it, young man, and then you have somebody that looks like a roadie from Pantera. Then they would just this is how they would treat it. This is what I would have thought, but that's not the way that it went.
You're impressive in your knowledge, your wide-ranging knowledge of not only science but philosophy and mythicism and religion itself. And I was impressed at the breadth that you can speak to. How do you see yourself mainly? Are you a? I know you said activist, but do you call yourself an atheist? Do you call yourself a mythicist? How do you define that?
Well, yeah, I have to call myself a mythicist because through my associations with a number of historians, biblical scholars, and experts on comparative mythologies and such, and then according to my own research in those areas as well, I've come to the conclusion that the Bible is almost entirely adapted from neighboring mythologies and older mythologies, and that characters like Moses, for example, it never existed in reality. If you had a time machine, you would not be able to find Jesus. That is my contention. You might find some individual guy who matches some tiny aspect of that myth, but you would never find one single person that you could declare you could say this is the historic Jesus, because there wasn't one. At a minimum, I think Jesus was a composite of 3 to 5 people, none of whom would qualify as an actual historical Jesus, and certainly none of them would have been the deity that people believe in. In my perspective, there is no truth to the Bible whatsoever.
Right, and this is Sean Frasick, Aaron. Thanks again for being on the show, and I just wanted to touch base on the interview you did with D.M. Murdoch. That was incredible, first of all. Actually, D.M. Murdoch was our inspiration for starting Mythicist Milwaukee, because we truly feel that this information that you're talking about in the comparative religion aspects, it's just not well known. And when you start, I think for a lot of people, including ourselves, once people start knowing that information, how many lawgivers there were, how many other godmen walked on water, raised the dead, and things of that nature, people start to kind of put it all together, So again, yeah, it was a great interview with her on, and we really appreciated that you had her on.
Well, I certainly appreciated having her on. I thought she was brilliant. I've got halfway through her book, and the arguments so far, she says that it changes pitch to argue from a different perspective in the second half. I'm looking forward to that. But so far what I've got is really damning. And it's definitive. It's a very good piece of work with an excellent scholarship. It's inarguable, I would think.
Yeah, exactly.
But, we'll see what kind of excuses people come up with.
And, the one thing that you touched on in the argument, I kind of wanted to, or in the interview, I'm sorry, I wanted to touch on today was zeitgeist. Now, her scholarship and her reputation's got a big black eye from that movie, even though, as she explained in the interview, she didn't put that film together. A gentleman by the name of Peter Joseph did. He actually took her work and then several other religious scholars, I guess you'd call them, work, one being Jordan Maxwell. That's where you get the whole son pun that comes up, and it's highly refuted. But yeah, zeitgeist for us, what it did, and I understand the scholarship issues with some of the video, but what it did for us is it took this extremely difficult information and simplified it, made it, and put nice images in there and kept it entertaining, and it forced us to then challenge ourselves to learn more about the information out there in mythicism. So I am a proponent of the Zeitgeist film, part one of the Zeitgeist film, only in the sense that it does offer up that information to people on a layman's scale. That anyone can kind of watch it and understand it, and then challenge themselves to learn more about it.
I mean, my perspective on the Zeitgeist film, I mean, I think I watch these things with an open mind. On the middle section, when they're talking about, American currency, I really had nothing to speak to that. I don't know the history of finance very well to bring that up at all. I was able to, I considered the arguments for the 9/11 conspiracy thing, and I did actively investigate those on the suspicion that maybe what they were talking about was actually true. And I've concluded, of course, that it's not. And there were several reasons why, and I'm sure people want to argue with me at some point because they still believe in that 9/11 conspiracy thing, and I just need to find what it is why do they still hold to that? I don't know. But once they can explain that, then we can go find out what the real issue is. I've satisfied my own curiosity with that. But on the first one, the one that we're talking about now, I had people calling me to say that they'd seen this movie and they wanted to know if I could verify it. And there wasn't that much that, through my limited expertise that I could actually verify, but there was a couple of things that didn't match, and the only one that comes to mind right now was the one about the son, S-O-N versus S-U-N. Obviously, that only works in English. And D.M. Murdoch said that was a pun. It was something that they'd done just in fun, and I guess that ended up in the movie as if it wasn't. They weren't just being tongue in cheek. Right. And so when you have things like that, when she didn't have any kind of controlling hand on the production, and I don't think that she realized that her work was also going to be associated with 9/11 conspiracy stuff either. I don't know. I can't speak for her, but if I had put my scholarship into trying to present something accurate, and then it was attached to something promoting also the Loch Ness Monster or something like that, I think I'd be upset about that. No. And I can imagine what it would do to my reputation, even though I had no direct control over that production.
And you will get a lot of, I guess, trolls or whatever you want to call them. Anytime she's involved in an interview or any type of appearance, you have people just slamming her about that film, and I just think it's so unfair. Because, like you said, she had no control over it. Peter Joseph took it and ran with it and then abandoned it as soon as it started getting the negative reviews around it.
One of the unfair things about that is that she commented that she is often judged just on her name, and I got to see this before our interview even began, because we saw people in the YouTube comments that were attacking her basically just on her name for lack of anything else. And they couldn't speak to any of her arguments. They didn't know any of her arguments. So it's a very superficial judgment. The exact same thing could be said about, say, Sir Isaac Newton. What if we immediately discount him because he believed in alchemy, or because he was a creationist who thought that he had special divine revelation direct from God, so that he could understand the scriptures better than every other man on earth? We could take whack job comments like that and then just use that to discredit everything else he did, which of course would be completely unfair.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Principia works. We've confirmed it.
Let's use this opportunity to plug your own podcast. That's that was Ramen episode 10, I believe. Is that right? What's going on with that podcast? Is that pretty new? If that's just episode 10.
It is new, and it had very modest intentions, but it's picking up surprisingly nicely. Right now, we are number 6 in the religious category on Spreaker, and we've just been picked up on iHeartRadio.
Nice.
Yeah, I noticed that, and you talked to that during the interview, and I was wondering if you can share with us some of the best practices. I know it helps to have a celebrity atheist activist as the host, but definitely, what are some best practices for those out there that are trying to get on the podcast or producing radio shows and things of that nature?
And that is twice that we use the word celebrity.
Yeah, and I said I don't think that word necessarily applies, but for the course of this, and maybe during a conference, perhaps maybe. But speaking as far as making a podcast and making it successful, I mean, I've had the luck of doing it exactly once and having it turn out well. So I don't have a control group. I can't tell you what I did at another time when failed. But in this instance, I just wanted to do something a little bit different than what other people were doing. I wanted to interview people who were actually taking action, because I identify, there's so many other things that I identify as, but one of them is progressive. I want to see people awaken. I want to see people take charge. I mean, this was supposed to be a government of the people, right? Which means the people actually have to do something. And so when I see people that are actually taking action, regardless what it is, it doesn't always have to center around religion. That's where my area of expertise is, so that's what it tends to lean to. But it doesn't have to be that. When you've got new technology, when you're taking on a new political challenge, a new social advantage, whatever it is. If you found something that is broken and you're fixing it and you might actually succeed, and other people are pointing to say, this person's doing this and should be noticed, those are the people that I want to talk to, the people who are actually already making a difference in some way.
What do you consider
And one of those interviews
progressive?
that I did was, one of the interviews that I did, for example, was people I don't even agree with. I spoke recently, or a few weeks ago, to a devil worshiper, somebody who actually believes in a literal devil and worships him. But his organization, his satanic church, had actually won a court case with regard to secularism and freedom of church and or separation of church and state, freedom of religion. And I had to commend his church group for that in the court case that they fought. After that, we start investigating, the devil worshiping beliefs, and I'm sorry to say, it comes into an argument at that point. But that wasn't the intent of the show.
We all find ourselves on that side of the fight, though, as the Supreme Court allows Christian and other religious paraphernalia displays on public property. Then the other groups have no choice but to go ahead and express themselves the same way. And of course, I think we're all in agreement that it would be better if they just ruled that none of it's allowed. But as long as they're going to,
and that doesn't ever happen until when you get religion in schools, as like our current governor now wants to do. He wants to have church, or he wants to have the teacher lead the students in prayer. Now, if you remember, this is what Madalyn Murray O'Hara got famous for. This is why she was the most hated woman in America, because in 1962-63, she went to court to stop teachers from leading school prayer. So that if you don't happen to be a Protestant Christian of the right denomination, then you're not going to be offended, or you're not going to be routed into this religion. So they're taking people of other faiths and forcing them to pray to their God. Of course, this is absolutely wrong. Any Christian should have sided with that, but of course, the way it's been represented is that she forbid students from being able to bring their Bibles to school, or to mention the Bible, or to pray on their own. All of this is completely untrue. All it was taken away was just the teacher can't force a specific religious a specific religion onto the students and force them to pray and follow in line with that prayer. But this is what our governor now wants to do. So it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says. He's going to overrule that. He wants them to have teacher-led student prayer.
Well,
Speaking of the Supreme Court, I remember watching one of your videos where the Alabama Chief Justice, Ray Moore, claimed that other religions, including Islam and Buddhism, didn't have First Amendment rights because those only applied to the freedom of religion to God the Creator, meaning the God that he chose. It's
Sometimes
extraordinary.
they get even more specific than that. They say that when they talk about religion, they're only talking about Christianity. And so they should take that when they say freedom of religion, it's freedom of Christian religion, and that nobody else counts.
That's
and it isn't until
incredible.
you
I couldn't
prove-
believe that when you expose that. That certainly more than the manger displays. That's the real specter.
we have our own fight here in Wisconsin. I personally am leading the charge against the creationist fundamentalist Christian camp, like a summer camp for kids, where the unified school districts, the public school districts around here, are sending kids on a science overnight, for a 2-day science excursion to this camp, where they have a science center that includes a 7-room creation walk, where you can go and learn how
learn
the scientific truth of creation as exposed in Genesis. Which, of course,
they're very free with that word truth, aren't they?
They really are.
Even when they
really
don't
are.
have anything that they can show is actually true. Nothing that would fit the definition of truth.
Or fact, or data, or anything.
I can't tell you how many marketing campaigns I've seen surrounding the Christian faith that they term as truth. It's a truth campaign. And when you actually
it's an
start,
assertion of conviction.
yeah, and when you start peeling away the mythical core, there's nothing left. So,
It seems like
Yeah, well,
a petty
good luck
problem.
with that. And if there's anything I can do to help in that situation, I'd be happy to. Because I really want to hold these people accountable. This is one of the things that irritates me most about religion. There's no kind of accountability. If somebody in Christianity or in Islam or any other religious group does something crazy, well, of course, that person's not representative of the group. Even when they're fundamentalist and they're following exactly what the core doctrine says, well, they're still not representative somehow, right? So there's always an exception. That guy wasn't a true member of our faith. And then the only way that they can show a defense is when they show that they're not fundamentalist. But how does that justify the religion?
It's funny.
A friend of mine is an ex-Islamic apostate from Iraq, and he gave me this beautiful quote when he said that if a religion is of peace, then its extremists would be the most peaceful people on earth. And I thought that was a beautiful statement.
That's
because
great.
that's what it is. And the only time you have peaceful or reasonable people in religion is when they are furthest out from the religious fundamentals. And it doesn't matter what the religion is.
Right. Perhaps
think it
Jainism
matters.
is the only good example of that, where the extremists go to extreme lengths to not even kill bugs.
Who's that?
But then, of course, they're not part of the political sphere, so in this area anyway, so I can't speak to them, though you may be correct.
Mm-hmm.
To my experience, every religion that I've had to encounter or deal with or that gets involved in politics in this area, that's been the case.
Well, my problem with Camp Timberley seems pale compared to what you got going on in Texas, where the governor is basically trying to...
Yeah, we have schools here that only teach and have been teaching for a long time through various means. They've been teaching creationism legally in public school. They've been teaching the Bible as historical fact legally in public school through loopholes in religious studies class. These lessons very often include denigration of other religions, anti-Semitism, and, of course, it's always instilling the right-wing conservative values thing.
You're making me think a lot, Aaron. So do you feel like that religion is simply just an arm of politics? Because with Republican and Democrat, they both assume supremacy. In the same way with religion, even if you want to exclude the extremists, they're saying, well, then our centrist position is supremacist. Every religion seems supremacist.
Yeah, and here they're dominionist. Our governor, Rick Perry, self-identifies as a dominionist. Do you know what a dominionist is? If your listeners don't know what a dominionist is, you can be a dominionist Christian, you can be a dominionist Muslim, but a dominionist means that your belief perspective is that your religion should eventually be in charge of everything.
Oh,
And so-
Dominionist, D-O-M, yes.
What's that?
Dominion, D-O-M, dominionist, like they hold dominion over the other religions. I'm getting to the
And
etymology of the
eventually,
word.
to the extreme that some people want to take this to is where they enforce Levitical law.
Nice.
Or Sharia. Yeah, it's the same thing.
We wouldn't have
mean,
any hands, any of us.
In,
for
in
that.
the Abrahamic faiths, I mean, that's what the religious texts state. I mean, theirs is the one and only, So, I mean, it's not far-fetched. I mean,
So do we stand to lose this? Is there a real chance, Aaron, that we lose this fight as we see the numbers of non-religious people rising and atheism rising unquestionably in America? But yet these
what
advances
you're
by
seeing is
creationists are they going to? Should we be
Okay,
worried?
there's a reality to look at here. We are seeing religion in decline. At least Christianity is in general decline worldwide. And this is even going on in the United States, and it's noticeably going on particularly in Texas. There have been severe statistical drops in religiosity here in Texas. But what you're getting at the same time, believe it or not, is you have an increase in the number of people who identify as creationists, almost half the population. Now, to be a creationist, you have to deny science both in principle and practice, because one of the things that you're against, not only are you against evolution specifically by definition, but it also is, creationism is against methodological naturalism. They want to be able to use magic as an explanation. Now, they don't ever call it magic. Of course, they call it miracles, but the two words mean exactly the same thing. They have the same definition. So they're arguing for magic as opposed to natural processes. Methodological naturalism is the thing that they're against. So in order to be creationist at some degree, you have to drop science. So what we used to have, the mainstream people, used to have some kind of belief in spirituality, some concept of God or soul or what have you, but they also understood that you needed to understand science and accept science as a way of working things. But now we have people that either understand science and have rejected religion outright, or those that still embrace religion have rejected science outright, and we end up with a polarized population.
And the two were not.
Now, while what?
The two were not mutually inexclusive when I was growing up. It was you could be a religious person and still believe in science. The fact is
That's exactly correct. And while I would say that there is no truth in religion, and I would also go further to say that there is no value in religion.
I love this.
And I would therefore say that a population made up of people that didn't have any religion at all would certainly be better than a religious population. At the same time, I don't like the polarization. I don't like people, holding to a religion and then dropping science and becoming extreme. Well, in a sense, that's extremism right there.
My point.
You're no longer in that centric position.
Right, you become an apologist.
My take on the school thing is that we don't allow society, we don't allow parents to teach their kids, the language of speaking in tongues, whatever language that is. No one's allowed to teach their kids that instead of English. No one's allowed to teach them math that doesn't add up, with a different math system that doesn't make sense. But suddenly we're allowing them to teach science that's simply not true, that's been proven to be not true. Isn't that child abuse? And how do we let a segment of the populace get away with that?
Okay, here's the problem. For whatever reason, it is considered bad form for you to inform someone else's child that there is no Santa Claus. And by the same token, and for the exact same reason, you can't tell someone else blatant facts about evolution because, for whatever reason, you're somehow violating that person's fixed beliefs, their desire to believe something that is not true. I've actually had people argue with me that they have the right to be wrong.
That's
I
awesome.
suppose they do.
Well, I've had people tell me that,
That's
for
what my
example,
girlfriend says.
I gave a specific example once. I mean, when we're talking about teaching things that we know are false, what the hell is the difference between going into a history class and having people tell you that Christopher Columbus was the first president of America, for example?
No.
No, that's
Or that
there is no
Ben
difference.
Franklin was the first king of America, whichever. And what I've been told by a surprising number of people, including not even always religious people. I've had atheist libertarians tell me this too. that if that's what parents want their children to be taught, then that's what those children should be taught.
I don't see how
And
that
it doesn't
raises
matter
us.
that we can prove that it's wrong, because fact, truth, these things are irrelevant. It's whatever the parents want their kids to believe. So they have a right to lie to their children. And somehow we don't have a right to tell the truth to those same children. But the way they've got the school system set up here in Texas with our history books now, as well as our science books, they have the right to lie to our kids, knowing full well that what they're saying is not true. But it doesn't matter, because all that matters is whether they believe what they've been told to believe. And they'll be punished if they don't believe.
Don't you miss the beauty of the metaphor if you take the Bible literally? I mean, it's a nice story with we grew up reading the Bible and discussing what it actually meant, what the poetry meant.
Not
to take
all
it
of it's
literally.
nice.
Well, not all of it's nice, but all
I
of it's...
gotta contest you on that too. And I'm not. I don't mean to be argumentative. I'm just saying, how do you read the Bible and come away saying that's a nice story?
Right.
Well, I'm just talking. I mean, to say that the story. There's nothing wrong with the story of creation and God. It was explained to me as a
When
youth.
I first read the Bible as a child, I'm not kidding. By the time I got to the end of Genesis, I literally flung it across the room in disgust.
The story of the parts of it that they cherry pick that explain God's love for us and can be taken metaphorically, I think can be defended as having given people hope and faith over the years, and
While at the
some
same
measure
time,
of comfort.
we're going to have to kill everybody.
But how
Right.
how do you spin it as literal and then try to take anything of value out of it?
If it is taught in the same sense that Greek mythology is taught, or Egyptian mythology, or Norse mythology, then you have an argument. But when it's taught as history, or it's taught as historical, or different people actually experience these things, that's when it becomes a weapon for social control.
Yeah, no, I remember when I grew up, I was in an area that was very heavily Catholic, Hispanic Catholic. And when I was in high school, I remember that there were students that weren't allowed to see the movie Jesus Christ Superstar, for example, and they weren't allowed to study Greek mythology because they believe in a different religion. So we had students, and I'm not kidding about this, that showed up with this one girl, for example, showed up with a letter from her mother excusing her from that class and from her preacher, saying that she believes in a different religion and shouldn't be taught about the Greek gods.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's remain ignorant about
Where their religion actually
other
comes
cultures.
from, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. In my days of being Catholic, I listened to a Franciscan deliver a sermon how he went to see the Last Temptation of Christ while he was in seminary school, and that people threw rocks at him as he was entering in, and they didn't realize that as his own congregation, he had kind of hidden himself, so he would sneak in, and I found that wow, very cool.
Yeah, and of course, I'm 52 years old, so when I'm talking about when I was in high school, Catholicism has gone through a number of changes since I was in high school. We've the last several popes, for example, have come out in favor of education, come out in favor of science and astronomy and even evolution.
Well,
Such
Catholics-
was not being done in the 70s.
Yeah. And that's Mormonism, that's Scientology, that's any of the religions that exist right now will change as society changes.
Yeah, when I
think.
was in high school, for example, the Mormons still held to that thing that blacks could not be priests
Correct.
or couldn't even belong to the church because they bore the mark of the devil,
Yep.
the mark of Cain.
Yep.
I think it was.
They refused to fight the spiritual battle against Lucifer on Earth, so they were cursed by Elohim. That's
Nice
correct.
story. Nice story, dude.
And so somewhere or other in the 80s, I think it was, that history changed. And it's kind of like when the Catholics suddenly decided that there was no purgatory after all.
Or limbo.
And
I think it was limbo. Purgatory is still real.
Is it?
And then Mary
Okay.
actually
It's
did
limbo,
ascend to
yeah.
heaven. Yep, correct. It's
Yeah, and
interesting.
then they invented 7 more deadly sins.
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually have on Monday we have Jamie DeWolf coming on the show, and he's the great grandson of L. Ron Hubbard. So his side of the family was actually disowned by his grandfather was L. Ron Hubbard Jr. So he actually disowned his son early on. So it'll be interesting to kind of pick his brain, and it's just another example of people will believe what what they want to believe, even though you're shown, the facts are right in front of you that it's not true.
Let me make another plug for Aaron here. I was introduced to actually the atheist movement. Probably wouldn't have met you nice fellas here in the studio with me if it wasn't for Aaron. It's specifically his 10th or fundamental foundational problem with creationism. Yes, thank you. Where he works through evolution, and it's absolutely convincing. If you haven't seen it, look it up. 10th Foundational, AronRa on Google will get you there.
We'll post it later.
And it was quite excellent. I have two questions. So, how did you get so good at phylogeny? I have a master's in science, and you are awesome. And also I want to make a plug for his Patreon, which I looked before the show, 420 patrons and 2,400 per video. So we hope you continue to make more. Log on to his Patreon if you want to support Aaron. But how did you have formal training? How did you get so good?
Well, on the matter of phylogenetics, I mean, classification of life forms has always been an interest of mine. It's been just a pet fascination. And I just explored that topic when I had the opportunity to do so. I was in a situation where, for a number of years, I was working in a call center environment that allowed me unrestricted browsing and for extreme overtime for years. And so I found myself in science discussion blogs and started following up on the material there. I read constantly for 3-4 years on the scientific background.
From amateur to expert.
Eventually, yeah, well, kind of. When I went into college at some point after that, I was going to go get an MCSC degree, and I wasn't really feeling it, but I walked into the wrong room or walked into the wrong building, and I happened to I went into the science building, never being familiar with the campus, and I happened across a paleontology display, and it struck me that I knew every fossil that was in the display, and I knew the scientists behind the fossils, and I knew the controversy behind all of these, and I remember thinking, why do I know all of this? And why am I going for an MCSE if I know all of this? And so I signed up as a geoscience major instead.
That's incredible. That's a great story.
You really are very articulate on a wide range of topics when you do your thing, and I can only hope to get to that point. We want to do what you do, man. Thanks for being with us. I got a couple of announcements. We're going to let you go. He's AronRa. He can be found at where? Go ahead and plug it, Aaron.
Well, where can I be found?
The name of your podcast.
Yeah, I'm on the Raw Men podcast. I have a website that shows all of my material. It kind of works as my CV. It's simply aronra.com. That's ARONRA.com. And it shows links to various presentations that I've given in the Foundational Falsehood series, and, of course, the shows and podcasts that I get featured on. So that's probably the best way to refer people.
You heard it here. Thanks for being with us, Aaron.
Ace of Clades, Free Thought blogs, too. If people don't know what a clade is.
Yes.
I don't exactly quite know what a clade is, but...
All right. Thanks
Need
again.
I explain that? A clade is a classification group that includes all of its descendants.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. I mean, I get the kingdom phylum, all of that. I did not know what a clade was. Thank you.
King Philip came over, right?
He did.
All right.
Is there a dirty word for that, or is there a dirty acronym for that, Aaron? For that kingdom phylum class order?
This is family.
If there is one, I don't know it.
I was hoping.
Family radio. All right, buddy. Thanks for joining us. We're going to let you go. We'll talk
my
to you
pleasure.
soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron. Take it easy. This is www.riverwestradio.com. You've been listening to the Kraftkast, and thanks to guests AronRa tonight, internet personality, and really extraordinary the way he can speak on a variety of subjects, and he's right there with the answers when it comes to these creationist boobs. He just slaps them down. It makes me so jealous. I can talk and I can shout and I can, I think I'm pretty sharp, but I'm not ready to do what that guy does. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. He's well versed.
We have a guest tomorrow night as well as Monday?
Yes, we have a guest tomorrow night. Doug Michael out of New York. He runs the Awake in the Age of Revealing, and he also has a pretty popular YouTube channel. He's interviewed us. He's interviewed DM Murdoch, several other scholars. I'm not calling us scholars, but actual scholars.
Nice.
So he'll be on the show. And then Monday is Jamie DeWolf, the great-grandson of L. Ron Hubbard.
In a special episode of the Mythicist Milwaukee show at 5 p.m. on Monday. So join us tomorrow and Monday for those guests. And we are making way now for Dirty D, who's going to lay down the best of local urban beats. See you next week, everybody. Thanks, guys.